And breaking news just coming in, Indian student has been killed in the shelling in Kharkiv. Kharkiv is the second largest city in the country. It is believed to have been one of Russian military's first strategic targets. It is located over 30 kilometers from the Russian border in the northeast of Ukraine. Russian missile attacks have hit the center of Ukraine's second largest city, including residential areas and the regional administration building. Kharkiv is believed to be home to over 3,000 Indian students, with the second highest number of Indian students after Kiev. In a tweet, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson said, I quote here, "With profound sorrow, we confirm that an Indian student lost his life in shelling in Kharkiv this morning. The ministry is in touch with his family. We convey our deepest condolences to the family." He also said that the Foreign Secretary is calling in ambassadors of Russia and Ukraine to reiterate our demand for urgent safe passage for Indian nationals who are still in Kharkiv and in cities in other conflict zones. Earlier, the Indian embassy in Kiev has asked its citizens to urgently leave the Ukrainian capital. This comes as Russia's military convoy closes in on the city. In a tweet, the embassy wrote, all Indian nationals, including students, are advised to leave Kiev urgently today, preferably by available trains or through any other means available. Now, Tuesday's announcement comes after reports of Indian students allegedly being harassed while trying to cross Ukraine's border into neighboring countries. India has launched a massive evacuation plan to get these students back home at the earliest. It is being called Operation Ganga. This is an initiative to airlift Indian students to safety. Helming this initiative are 4 union ministers who will look after evacuations from 4 different countries. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also called in the Indian Air Force to help evacuate Indian nationals. The Indian Air Force will join the government's Operation Ganga, and as per reports, it will also deploy several of its C-17 aircraft to bring back Indians stuck in the region. The Indian Air Force aircraft will also help deliver humanitarian aid to the conflict-ridden region. And for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal is now joining us live. Siddhant, we have reports that an Indian student has been killed during the shelling in Kharkiv this morning. What can you tell us about this incident?
Well, situation has taken for the worst, and this is something that is truly a shocking development. We know that India has been raising with both Russia and with Ukraine safe passage for Indian nationals, something that India has been talking about with both the countries. In fact, on Sunday, the Indian Foreign Secretary had called in the Russian envoy and the Ukrainian envoy, calling for safe passage for Indian citizens and making sure that they are safe. But the unthinkable, of course, has now happened, and this is something that India is going to shortly raise up with both the envoys, and not only here in Delhi but also in Kyiv and in Moscow. The Indian envoys are going to raise the matter with the respective government, but nonetheless we know that when it comes to the Indian nationals, particularly Indian students, the Indian government has already launched Operation Ganga, and flights are going on full swing to neighboring countries like Romania, Hungary, Slovakia and Poland, making sure Indians who have crossed over the border can be brought back to India. For this, Indian Air Force has also been roped in. But largely the chaos is at the border, how these Indian nationals cross the border.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to come to that. What is the status of the Indian students that are yet to be evacuated from Ukraine?
So there are 2 sets of students. One, of course, who are in Ukraine. Most of them want to cross the border, and most of them are seeking some kind of vehicle to come to the border. The Indian side, the Ministry of External Affairs, has issued numbers as well, toll-free numbers, email IDs. And we also know there are teams who are situated in the western part of Ukraine. Now, when it comes to the other set of students who have crossed into countries, as I just mentioned, the 4 countries that border Ukraine on the western border, including, of course, Moldova as well. There, of course, they are safe, but they want to leave those countries as soon as possible. There are non-stop civilian flights being sent to these countries, and the money will be, the cost will be, in fact, borne by the Indian government. We know that 4 ministers have also been deputed who will be going. 2 ministers have already left. 2 more ministers are going to leave very soon. So, essentially, this is a multi-pronged strategy. There are, of course, worries in New Delhi, but we know that that the Indian government has multiple times reiterated that its number one priority is to make sure that the safety of its nationals is paramount.
Right. Also, speaking of the Indian government's advisory, it had put out an advisory today asking all the Indian nationals to leave Kiev immediately by whatever means available. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this advisory is perhaps the most scary, to use the word advisory, that has been issued by the Indian mission in Kiev, telling the Indian nationals to leave the country, because it is clearly a signal that Kiev will be soon under threat. We have seen the reports of Russian mobilization, Russians at the gate of Kiev, and that is a worrisome factor for many foreign nationalities, including the Indian nationalities. Many of these Indian nationals have converged to train stations to go to the western part of the country. But essentially, it is a long wait, and we know that the Indian mission has issued advisory in the past as well. But today's advisory is essentially the red line, which is something that every Indian needs to pay heed to before it looks like the situation turns to the worst in the national capital of Ukraine.
Right. Also, speaking of Operation Ganga, we know that the Indian Air Force has now been roped in. 4 union ministers will now be ensuring the evacuation from 4 different countries. Can you just take us through that?
So the Operation Ganga was launched just a few days ago. In fact, it was launched over the weekend. And under the Operation Ganga, there are civilian flights who are going to the neighboring countries, because these countries are safe, and these countries are hosting a lot of not only Indians but also refugees. We know approximately 3 to 4 lakh Ukrainians, obviously all of them women, have crossed the border, because males are not allowed, Ukrainian males are not allowed to cross the borders. They will have to stay in the country to fight the Russians. But largely, when it comes to the Indian government's priorities, first, diplomatically, the Indian External Affairs Minister has been in touch with all the foreign ministers of the region. There have been multiple phone calls. And of course, the Indian Prime Minister also has spoken to many of his counterparts in those countries like Slovakia. So there is the diplomatic aspect, there is the political aspect, there is the civil aviation aspect to it, and now, of course, the Indian Air Force being roped into perhaps one of the largest operations launched by the Indian government in last few years.
Right, Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all the updates on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.